Welcome to the the Culturati Storm. Conversations with Kierna Mayo. I'm your sound seductress, Kierna. The Culturati Storm explores steamy connections. Think hot threesome, the culture, the community, and the self. You know the program. Intimate conversations with the leading creatives that goes deeper than the usual height. We get right to the hard stuff. Tonight on the Culturati Storm, nothing is off limits between consenting adults. So I want you to slip on a little something, light a candle, maybe some incense, maybe something else. I want you in the just right mood for where we're going. You are safe, soft and warm in the loving embrace of the Culturati Storm. Okay, let me stop. I tried it. Al Wood and Vaughn Harper, let me live, Quiet Storm veterans. This episode might get your juices flowing, but probably not those juices. I'm about to call HR on y'all. Your mind is what I'm talking about getting wet. Get ready for a grown-up talk that requires a certain kind of intellectual open-mindedness, and that you leave your pearls on the nightstand for those of you inclined to let your respectability shit get in the way of what I think is actually a very important discussion. For sure, we'll be talking about sex and bodies, really going there, but not exactly in a sexy chocolate kind of way. The only way to explain this episode is to put it in a new category I'm calling Critical Race WAP. See how you're stuck now? Don't even know what to do with that, right? Critical Race WAP. Stay with me. And don't hate on me, actual black women critical race theorists, or Cardi, or Meg, because y'all all have the exact same hot under the collar effect on a certain type of nasty conservative. This episode of Culturati is called A Hoe Evolution. I can already feel that this episode is going to be a full-on auntie edition, meaning there's no possible way I'll get through this one without involving y'all in yet another back in the day story. But for real, back in the day, when Latifah dropped UNITY off of her 1993 Black Rain album, I was a young, fresh out of college editor working at The Source magazine. I found myself beginning a media career in the throes of the golden era of hip-hop culture, the whole kit and caboodle, rappers to writers. I was deep up in it. It was no longer just my role to merely be of the culture. The being in the clubs part was easy. Now my job required that I was also a critical observer of said culture. But by the early 90s, one didn't have to be but so observant to feel the shift in the music toward a more aggressive brand of misogyny. And just as apparent, the way that women in hip-hop, mostly black women, were being funneled into certain, quote, types. Exhibit A.
Bitches ain't shit but hoes and tricks.
Back then, according to the unwritten rules of hip-hop, to the male-written rules of hip-hop, hoes were a type. The type most of us didn't want to be. We'll unpack that questionable stance in a minute. Flash forward to sex-positive ass now. In fairness, a lot has happened to get us here. Conversations, movements, language, academic pedagogy. The culture today is seeing a good number of powerful, talented women literally call themselves hoes. Sorry, La. I mean, everything from Amber Rose's IG breakup post caption, when you can finally breathe the air of hoe life again, to Jasmine Sullivan's Hotels. That's a classic. Note the very French H-E-A-U-X spelling. Oui, darlings. To Insecure's Issa D's self-motivational girl in the mirror hotation chant of life.
Go for it, go for it, go. Hoe for it, hoe for it, hoe.
So while I have you in a modern hoe state of mind, Let me introduce you to a woman who I think is one of the smartest, most subversive sex-positive podcasters out here, Sam Riddell. Sam is an award-winning podcast producer and documentary videographer who hails from Queens, New York, and is the principal host of the critically acclaimed queer, Black feminist-focused sexuality podcast, Hoe Uprising.
Welcome to the Hoe Uprising, the podcast about sex, love, and dating from the perspective of me, Sam, one Black, non-monogamous, pansexual feminist hoe who lives in New York City and whose pronouns are she and her.
And me, Rodeka, one fat Black existentialist, polyamorous femme whose life is a series of coincidences that somehow landed her here. And my pronouns are she, they.
Listen, this podcast is fun, funny, real, and very not safe for work. If you are of a certain age or one of those sisters still fighting unnecessarily hard to hold on to tired, patriarchal frameworks about sex, desire, and female bodily autonomy, then honey, Hoe Uprising may very well be the education you need. Apologies to about half of my generation. So I'm scrolling through Hoe Uprising episode list, and the tags alone are everything. Dick pole vault, walking in on your parents, whole sabbaticals, and radical fairies. And that, my friends, was season 1. Now Sam and her team are up to season 6, and the most recent episode available before we recorded is called, hold on, Only Intersectional Feminists Can Eat This Ass, okay? Well, okay.
Hoe Uprising is very much me growing as, I guess, a storyteller and a professional in the media space, but also as a hoe and a woman and somebody who was getting in touch with their romantic sexual self. A little bit out of college, I had been working on a lot of like queer Black feminist video stuff with a production partner of mine. We were also just like two very goofy people who were interested in making people laugh, entertaining people, educating people, right? So we were making video content, and we were invited to be guests on someone else's podcast about vaginas. That was literally the topic of the episode. What our vaginas do, and like, you know, that funny smell that comes that we all get, or like the way that sexual partners interact with our labia and things like that. Like, it was just a whole almost 3-hour conversation where we were being surprisingly open for such an intimate topic. And I thought, oh, we're kind of good at this. And clearly, like, we just have no shame up in here.
So was that first moment kind of like what conversations were like in the dorm or just in your sister circle?
Right. That's how we talk to each other, especially because at the time I was in a monogamous relationship with someone who I had started dating in high school. So since I was like 16 years old at that time. And my production partner was in a pretty long-term relationship with someone who she had met in college, right? And we both opened up our relationships, and we're both going down a non-monogamous route. So both of us were like having the most sex with the most people and having these experiences that we had never had before. So there was a lot of back and forth between us in general. And the chemistry was really there and stuff. And we still wanted to continue to make content for people that was educational and informative and entertaining. And video was just kind of expensive. So I pitched the idea, like, let's start a podcast. And one of the running jokes that we had was that when you have like a margarita or two is when the inner Hoe Uprising occurs.
Okay. Yes.
I feel like you will know when your inner Hoe Uprising happens. You feel it in particular places in your body.
Listen, everyone listening, you will know when it's happening.
Yeah.
This reclamation of the word hoe by some younger women, in many respects, has a direct parallel to how some Black people have explained their embrace of the N-word. Remember that time Jay-Z tried to make it make sense to Mother Oprah?
Words. People give words power.
Yeah.
You know, and for our generation, what we did was we took the word and we took the power out of that word.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we turned a word that was very ugly and hurtful into a term of endearment. So, I mean, even when someone says, there's still intention behind what you say.
Mm-hmm.
But pretty much took the power out of the word. Because if we just start removing words from the dictionary and just make up another word the next day, so we don't address the problem. The problem is racism, right? That's really the problem.
So we disagree.
It's no doubt a debatable take whether language used to berate, belittle, and cause irreparable psychological damage to a people can ever be empowering. But there is an undeniable shift in the dynamic when you consider the fact that an entire new generation of women are interrogating, transforming, and then repositing the inherent power associated with the word hoe back onto themselves. And even that has some nuance.
The definition of hoe is so subjective depending on who is saying it, and the person who is saying it, if it's not in like a positive uplifting light, is weaponizing it against you. And so if I'm calling myself that and I'm saying that all of the negative things that you're attaching to it aren't negative, then I'm de-weaponizing it, right? Still, obviously the show is still called that, and that is still my take on it. But I have heard nuance from other folks. Like I have two really good friends in the podcasting space who say something along the lines of, we can't reclaim something that we never actually recreated. And so like these friends, they use the word hoe and they use the N word and stuff like that. But in all actuality, are we really taking it back if it really was never ours, you know? If people really can use it to still weaponize against people. So I want to like still continue to make space for that nuance when talking about the word hoe. And then even more so, like I am a person who works a vanilla job. Like I have a sexy podcast, but at any given moment, I can stop that podcast and still it won't affect my career. But there are people who are the real hoes, you know, like people who have sex to make money. But I want to recognize the privilege that I have in using that word in the space that I have created, while also not being a person who is having sex for money or doing anything sexual for money, really. It's definitely a nuanced word, and the way that I use it is the way that I use it, but I recognize that other people don't connect with it in that same way.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of blowing my mind. I did not expect you to say quite that. I think I was being slightly less nuanced and being somewhat ageist in imagining that younger women have just kind of imagined that what existed before this time when the word hoe in particular was really weaponized against Black girls growing up in hip hop, like myself. Like that era, I remember this group called Hoes with Attitude. Obviously, like a play on niggas with attitude, NWA. But it felt like an affront to everything we were working to establish as hip hop feminists, right? What their existence in a way. But flash forward to Jasmine Sullivan. Just take her for an example, just using that language for the name of her killer ass album.
Right.
I think that I was imagining that you all just kind of wholesale have said, hey, we're flipping this like Black folks have flipped the N word, or some imagine that that is the case. I'm one of them. With not much thought about the other ways in which language actually has a whole lot of power in meaning and even privilege. I think you raised a point that I just hadn't thought about. So anyway, thank you for that check and that for that really expansive understanding. It sounds like you're having a reckoning.
Yeah. As a person, I've kind of grown to not respect myself in the way where it's like nasty, put some clothes on or anything like that, but respect myself enough to not enter into situations where enough evidence presents itself that I'm going to have a bad time or be disrespected or be met with misogyny or be met with bigotry or be met with just like a lack of respect or actual interest in me as a person. But I'm trying to allow myself to give other people grace, because just because you learned about all of this at X, Y, and Z year doesn't mean that someone else has. And just because you've been making this podcast that has like a mild amount of success doesn't mean everybody has heard it and been able to implement the tools that you've been learning all this time into their own lives. So
do you ever self-censor? Like, who told you you could say the things you said? Like, even back then, going back to when you first were talking about vaginas. How'd you become you?
Yeah. I think my parents were not like frou-frou. It wasn't just like, let her do whatever she wants to do. She's an artist or whatever. But they definitely encouraged me to have my own thoughts. And also, I think kind of like back when I was like in my early 20s and starting this, I'm going to take it to a really dark place for a second and then get out. When I started this show, my mom was really sick in hospice care, right? So a part of me was kind of just like not thinking fully. Like I've always been encouraged to kind of like speak my mind, but I wasn't thinking too far into the future of how this could potentially come back to bite me. I wasn't thinking like, oh, me talking about sucking dick or whatever is going to lock me out of job opportunities or anything like that. Cause I was like going through a lot of stuff. And then it just so happened that it walked me into job opportunities because the only reason why I am a podcast producer is because I started that podcast in the first place. And I think a lot of that is in part due to this zeitgeist shift that the show was a part of, where it's like, yeah, a Black woman talking about that doesn't mean that she's any less professional or any less capable at producing a show or sound designing a show or interviewing or booking this guest or anything like that.
Was your mother a big part of you becoming this kind of sexually realized young person?
She was a big part of me becoming a person who is very true to myself and very unashamed. Yeah, I really, really love her. I mean, she's not alive anymore. I love her because she's still a part of me. But yeah, she was definitely a big part of me just being able to express myself. And my dad, who is thankfully still with me, wasn't like that at that time. But I think knowing her and having her help me grow into a person also made him accept that.
Yeah, because I find that with young women who are sexually open, there's usually a woman, an older woman, that has either overtly or covertly signaled to them that sexuality belongs to you, that it is yours to own. It's rare that that happens in a vacuum.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
and that, that's one of the things that I also wanted to talk to you about. You'd had this episode with the sister on, I think it was like fine, 50 and fucking or something.
50 fine and fucking, yeah.
50 fine and fucking. And she was so like, I kind of fell in love with her. She was innocent and raunchy as hell. Like she was all the things.
I don't know what I rubbed against something one day.
It just begins, and you're just like, oh wow.
And it's like, whoa, hey.
How old were you when you started masturbating?
I think I started masturbating about 14.
Like every time you thought the story was like that she had reached the climax, the peak, it was like another turn.
You come over my house, we're gonna take a shower first. And we're gonna take a shower together. That was a big thing of mine.
It's like, what? So wait, this is the what husband? And then okay. Oh.
And at the time, I had days off during the week. When this cruise ship came back in, I made arrangement. I'm in New York City.
Right here.
These are the hotels that we live
These
for
are the
on this
hotels we live for. Like,
I was like, this woman, I think, is the entire truth. But who knew that she was just floating around in my generation?
I love her.
Your girl, Melissa. Stay tuned to Culturati, conversations with wannabe hoe, Kierna Mayo. We'll be right back. This is Culturati, conversations with Kierna Mayo. I'm Kierna, and now I'm the nerdy teacher's pet. School is in session, and our new professor, Sam Riddell, host of the podcast Hoe Uprising, is about to educate me and you on terminology we need to know but probably don't, and a deeper understanding of the very concept of sex positivity. Take notes and don't copy off my paper. Teacher, what is non-monogamous?
So non-monogamous, literally not monogamous. I used to describe myself as polyamorous, which many loves. So it's like it can be what you feel as a person and also the way that you live your life. I dated as a person who was seeking out many loving relationships, and I also felt like that is what I desired in life, right? And then somebody came on my show and said that they describe themselves as non-monogamous, and I was like, oh shit, okay, I think that's a little bit more fitting. And so it's not particularly the way that I date right now, because I think that if I was in a committed relationship with one person, I would also want to have sexual relationships with other people. So when I say I'm not monogamous, that's really what I mean. That is up to change in the future as I learn and grow and things like that. But that's what I mean by that.
Could a person be a non-monogamous person in a monogamous relationship?
Yeah.
Functioning as a monogamous person?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like you can have that desire, but still be monogamous, or you could have the desire and kind of be working towards opening up your relationship. There's also people who are like, it's like a two-way relationship where one person is non-monogamous and they'll go out and they'll have sex with other people, and the other person is solely monogamous and that's their only partner, but they've talked about it and made it okay.
The idea is consent.
Right.
Yeah.
The full thing of what I'm saying is actually ethically non-monogamous, and that's not like, oh, I'm better than you or anything like that. The ethics is really just implying that conversations haven't been had and everybody is a consenting individual.
Okay, so pansexual.
Pansexual just means attracted to all genders. So there's like a little bit of discourse there where some folks take bisexual to mean literally two genders. And most bisexual people that I've spoken to say that it means all genders. So from that definition, bisexual and pansexual are just synonyms. And that just means that I'm attracted to all genders, attracted to people regardless of their gender.
And demisexual.
That is on the scale of sexuality, not heterosexuality to homosexuality, but the scale of asexual to sexual. So asexual meaning like you just don't experience sexual attraction to people, and sexual meaning there's no parameters around it. Like you just experience run-of-the-mill, normal. I hate that because it's like defining everybody else as other, but it's just like being fully sexual. So demisexuality is kind of on that scale, and most demisexuals say that they need a deep emotional connection to a person to actually feel sexually attracted to them.
What do we mean when we say someone is sex positive, something is sex positive?
Yeah, I think in the past that might have been misconstrued as like just start fucking in the streets. Like sexuality is not bad. Everybody should be engaging in the most pleasurable kind of sex that they can and should, with all parties consenting. But now I think there's a more clear understanding from folks that it's just like whatever type of sexual being or non-sexual being you are, so long as you're being good to yourself within that and being good to other people within that, or not harmful to other people within that, or not harmful to yourself within that, then, you know, that's what we're striving for as sexual or non-sexual individuals.
It's interesting that certain things are co-signed, right? You get the sense that WAP is huge and a thing. At the same time, it creates complete chaos in the world of white politics. It creates complete chaos in the world of Black respectability.
Right.
It just creates, like, it's this thing that people constantly are responding to. In fact, I said I was going to create a show series called Critical Race WAP because I love the idea of conflating the best thinking around like race and freedom and wet ass. You know?
Yeah.
Like, why not? Sounds like peanut butter and jelly to me.
Yeah, I love it.
What do you think it is that makes WAP literally as a song, and just that moment in the culture? It just seemed like everyone was responding. What is it about Black women, particularly our bodies, our actions, our inactions, that is so provocative to every damn body?
Yeah, and it's provocative in different ways to, like you said, many people, but I think from the same root, right? Like America is like the number one nation in the world or whatever. And what is at the root of America? It's slavery. It's slavery. It is like having these depictions of Black people as being certain things and those things being negative. And so from jump, we've defined Black women as sexual, overtly sexual, and something to be scared of, something to keep your children's eyes away from, something to stay away from your man because the sensual Jezebel or Sapphire is going to steal the white man or whatever, or compel him to have sex, the unrapeable Black women and things like that. So we are still stuck on that, and it's not even being stuck because this country hasn't even existed for 300 years, and that's at the genesis of the way that we view a lot of things, right? So when a Ben Shapiro or something like that is like, oh my God, this is so bad for the children or whatever, he's calling directly back to that same Jezebel stereotype that is at the foundation of this country. On the flip side, for example, the respectability politics that comes in response to a WAP is kind of coming from a place of fear where we want to divorce ourselves so far away from the Jezebel stereotype that we don't allow for a nuanced and healthy sexual experience or representation of a Black woman. So I think that that's where that's coming from. And that's unfortunately rooted in white supremacist ideas about Black women.
Do you think that being a hoe, as you define it for yourself, is all empowering? Is there some part of hoism, and then maybe you can help my audience that probably won't be as sophisticated as the folks that you've been educating for 5.5 years, just, help us understand some of this way of thinking, like hoism as an idea?
Yeah, when you're engaging with the world, it's just not always going to be empowering because we live in an oppressive world that specifically oppresses people for expansive ideas of sexuality, whether you're a man, woman, non-binary, or whatever. But that oppression falls harder or sits heavier on you when you are Black and when you are born assigned female at birth, when you are queer, when you are trans and things like that. So I can't quite say if you adopt a sex positive mindset, everything's going to be positive. I'd be lying if I said being a hoe is the absolutely most liberating thing that you can do with your life. And then also inner Hoe Uprising as a concept is embracing your sexuality, whatever that means. But if we divorced inner Hoe Uprising from the word hoe, and we're just talking about the word hoe as someone who is a very sexual woman, non-binary person who doesn't let the weight of that word influence their decisions, you can't take that out of the world in which you're engaging with. Because there's a lot of inner work that needs to be sorted out too. Just having sex is not the answer to liberation. If you're having sex because you're trying to fill a hole in your emotions or your intimacy or something like that, that's not empowering. One of our goals is to make sex just a thing. You can engage with it. You cannot engage with it. It can make you feel good. It can make you money. You can do it when you're bored. But we want to divorce this idea that it's bad or that it should be stigmatized.
Did you hear that? Sex isn't bad and shouldn't be stigmatized. Here's an evidence list, a partial assortment of Gen X to Gen Z Black women artists you deserve that I compiled to drive this home. Adina Howard, Little Kim, Foxy Brown, Trina, Tiana Taylor, Kai, City Girls, Saweetie, Cupcake, and let me bring it back, because I can't forget Janet.
Miss Jackson, if you're nasty.
Over a span of more than 20 years, these are just a few of the women who have pushed the cultural boundaries of female sexual expression in unique, individual ways. There's also the young and beautiful Chloe Bailey.
It's incredible to watch your sister and collaborator find her voice. And I am so proud of her. I love you, sis. Here she is, and her first solo performance at the VMAs, Chloe!
The complicated online response to her solo music video and first live performance at the VMAs in September 2021 brought out the critics, but not just the usual suspects fueled by rampant misogynoir or respectability politics. Chloe meant to be hella sexy, and she hella was. But she also inadvertently widened the scope of the sex positivity debate among progressive Black women. Have some mercy, y'all.
What I'm finding on Twitter now is that now we can't critique the sexual girls. And not for being sexual, but just like anything, you know? Chloe Bailey performed, and a lot of people thought it was kind of cliche, very just like, okay, you're out here, you're emulating Beyonce, which, I mean, if anybody to emulate Beyonce, but you're just like shaking your ass, like do a little more, do something a little bit more interesting. We want to see ass, but we want to see more. And I'm seeing a pushback from other folks saying, oh no, you're anti-sex positive. You hate Black women. You can't critique this. And so I think now we're going really far in another direction where it's like, oh, we can't even talk about the girls who are being sexual because we're sex positive and that's it.
And that's it. Yeah. Full stop. So, okay. Wow, that is nuanced. But I'm so excited that that's a problem that we have.
Right. It's a good, interesting problem.
You know, I really had to sit with this idea for a minute. Seems to me this, quote, problem is actually a real mark of social progress. The idea that sex-positive, sex-loving Black women can raise a healthy critique of sex-positive, self-loving Black women in the public square, no less, and all of us leave with our sex positivity and self-love still in place, is like, yes. Trust me, it wasn't always like this. Listen to Chloe make it make sense.
This is a great question. Why are you showing so much skin? Because I can. It's my body, and I'm so proud of it, and I hope you're proud of yours too.
So you're watching the Gen Z conversation as well, yes, obviously.
Yes.
What's your observation kind of sitting right in the middle of this trajectory? Like, where do we go next? Where do Black feminists take this understanding of sex positivity as a politic forward?
Right.
Yeah.
I would like us to go next in directions like this conversation, right? Like something that I've been trying to do over the past couple of years is to have more conversations with folks who are older than me. And one of my best friends nowadays is a 94-year-old lesbian.
Love it.
And you find the answers in the middle, and you also find that there are multiple truths and we should all be acknowledging our truths. And so whether it be on Twitter or through podcasts or in real life, in-person conversations or phone conversations, community meetings, whatever it is, I want us to continue to have those conversations, but I really want us to have those conversations in respectful ways that is not just shutting down the other person.
Yes. I do appreciate that there are folks who kind of want to understand and delve into sex positivity as an idea, as an extension of Black feminism and how we live our lives with more nuance and more generational understanding.
Mm-hmm. Ultimately, I would like us to have more nuance and just more conversations with each other. When that framework exists where Black feminists are intergenerationally communicating on what's the next step, then everybody else is going to be intergenerationally communicating on what's the next step. So yeah, I mean, you know, Black women are not a monolith, Black feminists are not a monolith, Black womanists are not a monolith. But at the end of the day, we do like set the standards as a collective.
Absolutely. Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
What did you say? Oh, I thought you had tried to tell me something. Go about your business, baby. Have yourself a good day.
This powerful episode is yet another reason why I can't believe it took me so long to create a podcast. Getting to listen to and learn from women like Sam Riddell, who complicate our thinking about culture and when and where we as Black women enter, is my personal high. In addition to having the best podcasting voice ever, Sam and her co-host on Hoe Uprising are really doing the work to decolonize our bodies and our minds. Hey, it's been a very long time since I wouldn't even give a group with a name like Hoes with Attitude a listen. I'm just saying. Back in the source in 92, my brilliant boo, Dream Hampton, fancy filmmaker and executive producer of Surviving R. Kelly now, only gave them 1.5 stars. So could you really blame a sis? Culturati Conversations with Kierna Mayo is presented by Breakbeat and produced by PRX Productions. I'm the host and chief creator, Kierna Mayo. Our production team is Florence Burrow Adams, Sierra Spragley Ricks, Jonathan Cabral, John Bellamy, and Jocelyn Gonzalez. Dave Mays and Kendrick Ashton are executive producers for Breakbeat. Visit breakbeatmedia.com or at Breakbeat Media on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you're feeling Culturati, be sure to follow me at Kierna Mayo, that's KIERNAMAYO, on Instagram and Twitter. Share, comment, and subscribe to Culturati wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening to Culturati Conversations with Kierna Mayo. We'll be back every couple weeks. Come talk with me.